On behalf of the Africa Research and Impact Network, I want to take this opportunity to, first of all, welcome you to this discussion, and also just to highlight that we are co-convening this session under the auspices of the Adaptation Research Alliance sessions. As you are aware that the Adaptation Research Alliance is a global network of adaptation initiatives and also organizations that are pursuing adaptation across the world, both in developing and developed countries. And the ARA network was partly established during the COP26 with the support of the UK government. And so from that time, the passion has been to try and contextualize or build a foundation in terms of understanding what are the main adaptation issues that needs to be tackled, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges that could basically inform this kind of program. So ideally, it is a process of co-creation, co-development of a global program that is going to support adaptation, especially at the local levels. That also brings me to the idea around the locally led adaptation concept, which I think is gaining a lot of momentum in the global space. And in Africa, I think this is very central in terms of the discussions or the debates around climate justice, where vulnerable communities for a long time have not been attended to in terms of support for adaptation, both in terms of technologies, in terms of financing, in terms of capacity building. And in the process, the impacts of climate change on these vulnerable communities have exacerbated over the years. Now, there's a paradigm shift under the Paris Agreement where the focus on locally led adaptation with the view or with the expectation that these locally led adaptations are going to help basically transform the adaptation landscape and be able to support vulnerable communities to be more resilient to climate change in the context of enhanced ambitions under the Paris Agreement. Now, as the Africa Research and Impact Network, we did undertake a number of adaptation convening prior to the COP26 last year, where we brought together this was more than almost 300 stakeholders, experts, and policymakers from across Africa to basically try to discuss what are some of the gaps in adaptation research, but also adaptation practice in Africa. One of the things that came out clearly is the fact that there are a lot of locally led adaptation practices and innovations that are taking place in different African contexts. And this includes research activities, enhanced tools, innovative tools for assessing climate risks, innovative adaptation or resilience activities. But one of the gaps that we was highlighted in this discussion was the fact that some of the locally led adaptation actions are very innovative, but they lack opportunities, or they remain in small scale. So they lack opportunities to be scaled out in a bigger form, so that the impact that they produce to the local communities can be really felt, and the expected climate transformation can be achieved. This has not happened because of lack of proper understanding of opportunities for doing so. Lack of proper understanding of what are these locally led adaptation, what do they mean, and what do they entail, where do they exist, and how can they be supported better through different processes, private sector investments, policies, broader innovations and stuff like that. And this gives us the basis for this particular session, that over the last 3 years, the Adaptation Research Alliance has funded, 3 months, has funded a number of micro grants, small projects to basically work with local communities to develop some co-created adaptation perspectives, both in terms of activities, tools, and also just engagements, assessing the climatic risks that these communities are facing. And in Africa, I think we had about 14 microgrants. And on behalf of the Adaptation Research Alliance, the ARIN network, which is spread across 36 African countries, is convening or trying to strengthen, or has been actually identified by ARA to support the learning between these particular sub-grantees who are actually developing really very interesting outcomes. And that is also part of answering the question, the gap that I've mentioned around the opportunities to upscale the locally led adaptation. So the Gobeshona conference, which is happening, has been happening and is going on, I think, for the next few days, provides us with an opportunity to also anchor that particular learning. There will be a number of other sessions where we will try to bring the micro-grantees together and to be able to learn in a much more structured way. But in this context, we want to understand what are some of the things, what are some of the emerging results that these micro-grants have really brought out, what are the best practices, the innovations that are taking place in the different contexts that these microgrants were targeting. What are the lessons? What are the opportunities for us to begin thinking about scaling up this? And finally, what are the messagings that we need to take up and develop, especially now that we are having COP27 coming up in the African soil? So I want just to say that we look forward to the innovative, or to learning from the various projects, and we hope that we can be able to have a very interactive session and we can be able to see some of these opportunities much more clearly at the end of the session. And with those very few remarks, Leah, I want to give it back to you to continue with the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Atela, for that introduction. And it is against that very solid background that we will be welcoming the micro-grantees under the Adaptation Research Alliance to just present their projects, the outcomes, the impact, and what they have seen work in their specific localized contexts, which I believe is the gist of this Gobeshona conference. And so going up first, we'll be having the Africa Research and Impact Network, being led by Tom and Haron. Their project focused on developing community labs and climate risk maps in Mukuru informal settlement. And so that's just leading to better informing policy within the Nairobi County context. And I'll invite them to just take 8 minutes to present to us what their project has been about. And please let me know, Haron, Tom, are you able to present, please?
Yeah, sure, Leah, and thanks a lot. Unfortunately, I can't share my video. I'm trying and I'm getting an error.
Try again, you can.
Are you able to share your slides, please?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I hope my slides are visible.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
Okay, so under the Africa Research and Impact Network, I'm a research fellow, of course, with the Africa Research and Impact Network, and I'll be sharing on the micro grant that we've been implementing in Nairobi, Kenya, with the support of the Adaptation Research Alliance. As you can see, the heading of our micro grant is using community adaptation labs to co-assess climate risks in urban informal settlements, in the case of Mukuru in Nairobi. So my presentation, which will be brief, is structured in this manner. We'll give a brief introduction of the topic and the microgrant we are implementing and Mukuru itself. We'll be talking about the methods and some of the activities we implemented under this microgrant.
Sorry, Tom. Kindly, are you able to put the screen on full slideshow?
Oh, it's not on. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thank
think
you.
it's now visible. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we'll give some key highlights of the outcomes of this engagement and some of the key lessons we've learned in the process. So if you look at this particular photograph, you can see a river passing through the informal settlement of Mukuru. Mukuru is one of the slums in Nairobi city, eastern part of Nairobi. And there's a river passing through, right through the slum. And through this picture, you can see some settlements, informal settlements, closer to the river. On the other picture, you can see that these settlements are many, so it's not just the few which were captured, which we zoomed into to be able to capture the river, but there are several people living in Mukuru, around 400,000 people. And these different people have got livelihoods here. They have systems running here, even though the area was not well planned. So it's an informal area. Bringing it to the African context, most African cities are rapidly growing and in terms of urbanization and population. And this leads to such kind of informal settlements increasing in many cities in Africa. And therefore, this increases the exposure to climatic risks alongside other risks. So as we talk about climatic risk, we shouldn't forget other risks which these people and systems within the informal settlements are faced with. And a lot of research and policy attentions have been given to emergency response to disasters, or especially Nairobi, with little attention being given to the underlying climatic risks that exacerbates these disasters. And adaptation planning in Kenya mostly, because these are Kenyan specific case study, and I think it applies to some other parts of Africa and elsewhere. Adaptation planning is largely national or managed nationally, and therefore the local contexts are generalized and sector-based. So when we talk about agriculture, for example, health, they are sector-based, and the adaptation options and planning processes are generalized and then trickle down to the local communities. This portrays the exclusion of the informal urban settings, mainly due to lack of clear articulation of climatic risk. So we find that informal settlements like Mukuru are excluded in the planning processes of adaptation options and planning. In Mukuru, for instance, the government is upgrading the slums through a special planning area. So the area within Mukuru was declared a special planning area, meaning that no further development activities without coordination from the government. So the government is trying to coordinate further development while improving the infrastructures and basic services in the area. In this particular process, we realized that climatic risks were not factored in the plans. And the government is keen on upgrading the services and infrastructure, but not keen on including the climate risk knowledge to make these particular systems more resilient to climatic risks. And therefore, the micro grant that we are implementing is aiming to bridge that gap by bringing the climate risk knowledge through a climate risk assessment in Mukuru to be used in informing the upgrading of the slum. And lessons learned from this particular process can be taken elsewhere to show how or demonstrate how climate risk proof planning can mitigate climate risks and influence future urban plannings in other informal settlements of Nairobi and beyond. If I quickly go through the methodology, which is mostly a desk study and participatory approach, we reviewed several urban climate risk assessment tools, and that was done through a desk study and a lot of literature reviews. Then we developed an integrated climate risk assessment tool which we used to engage the different stakeholders through a participatory approach in a multi-level community lab. We call them the community adaptation labs, and therefore we targeted the households within Mukuru. We called it the household lab. Then we went to the community lab where we targeted the community heads. There are 13 segments within the special planning area. So we engaged them and also included the community-based organizations, different of them, working in Mukuru using this tool. And the tool was covering mostly two areas. We wanted to map out the climate risk knowledge within the community, if they are aware of the different hazards, and what they've been doing to adapt to these particular climatic risks, and what they want done differently moving forward, because the SPA is being implemented. And then we have the NGO labs. Different NGOs, both local and international, like the Kenya Red Cross, World Vision, and others, are working in Mukuru in different settings, and therefore we engage them at different levels. We call them the NGO lab. Then we have the policymakers and the decision makers lab, which we engaged last. I think early this week, on Monday and Tuesday, we held this particular session, and we brought in different Nairobi City County government officials and other key stakeholders in the policy space and decision-making space. And after this, we harmonize all this information gathered to develop a climate risk profile or a climate risk map for Mukuru informal settlements, highlighting the knowledge of climate risks within Mukuru and what need to be done differently. And this particular tool will be used to engage the SPA development process and implementation of the SPA further to integrate the climate risk and knowledge. Some of the key outcomes, just giving some highlights of what we have seen so far through this engagement, is that floods and landslides risks still dominates within Mukuru. I think that you can pick even from the first photo we showed. Then the vulnerability to climatic risk are still high in Mukuru, and the capacities are low. And these can be alluded to the informal kind of planning of the livelihoods and systems and settlements within Mukuru, but also the exposure to different climatic hazards is still evident. And this came out across the 4 labs. The impacts of drought is also felt, although the informal settlement is within the city, and this is manifested in terms of water shortages and high food prices due to low supply, as communicated from the community lab engagements. Then the exclusive planning processes. Most of the residents in Mukuru agreed that the targeted community members who are being engaged just to comply to the participatory approach that is required by the Kenyan law when doing infrastructural development. And therefore, most of the community members feel excluded in some of the planning processes for adaptation, and also in the climate proof planning processes. Lots of interests and lots of interests are still there from the different stakeholders, and the different perceptions on climate risks and their implications vary across these stakeholders. The private sector who are keen on development have a different perception. The policymakers and the community members have different perceptions, and different investors. So harmonizing all these climate risk perceptions to come up with a common development plan is key. So the different interests were also recorded from the different labs we conducted. Many people are not aware of the climatic risks, and the area is unplanned and exposed to different hazards. So we realize that many people in the community within Mukuru not aware of these particular risks, and their knowledge of the climatic risk is still shallow. And when you are not well informed, you can't adapt well. Then the government is too keen on infrastructural development and less keen on risk-proof planning and development. So you find that the government is keen on implementing the infrastructural development and improving the services, but not too keen on making this development climate risk proof. Some of the lessons learned, we realize that co-production of adaptation options at the local level is paramount, and therefore we need to promote inclusive planning. Then inclusive prioritization of adaptation option is key because the priorities vary among different groups and stakeholders. So different interests, especially the local community voices, should be included in the prioritization of the adaptation options. Then climate risk proof planning is essential in slum upgrading. We realize that this is an approach that the Nairobi City County government is adopting to improve infrastructures and services in other informal settlements. And therefore, the lessons learned in Mukuru through climate risk proof planning can be adopted in other planning processes to come elsewhere in the continent. More time and more resources might be required to realize the ultimate impact of integrating climate risk knowledge in the spatial planning area processes. In doing so, more time and more resources might be required if we have to achieve the ultimate goal of integrating this knowledge in the planning process, because it takes a lot of engagements. Then the last one is more community lab engagements is required to enhance awareness, enhance the capacity of the local communities to adapt to climate risks. With that, I thank you all for your attention, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation, Tom. I'm happy that for the work that is going on in Kenya, even in the informal settlement, because commonly these are the areas that are most vulnerable to hazard and that are most exposed. Next up, I'll invite Charity from the Slum Dwellers Initiative to just share with us what they are doing again in Kibra, in Nairobi, still the same country. So over to you, Charity. Are you on call? Are you able to share with us?
Yes, I'm on call. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Charity.
You can hear me from that side? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. That's fine. I'll just do project my presentation.
Yes, please.
Just a moment. We can see it from that side.
Yes, kindly put it on slideshow mode.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, so my name is Charity Mumbi. I am an urban and regional planner from Slum Dwellers International, Kenya. And we can see some logos there. We have Slum Dwellers and Muungano Wanavijiji. We have ARIN and ARA. So I'll just explain what is SDI and what is Muungano Wanavijiji to get a bit of context before we continue. And so for SDI, SDI is a non-profit organization that does offer technical support to Muungano Wanavijiji, which is a federation of slum dwellers in Kenya. So when we say Muungano Wanavijiji, we basically mean it's a movement of slum dwellers. It's a movement of slum dwellers. So for SDI, it is we have what we call SDI Kenya, which is an affiliate of SDI International, and so we have SDI located in 36 countries globally. So the vision of SDI, or rather what drives SDI globally, is the need to have inclusive cities where the low-income communities have adequate housing and services, and they can also be able to live in dignity. So therefore, that's where Muungano Wana Vijiji comes in. Muungano is not an institution, it is a movement of slum dwellers. And so the role of Muungano is to try and improve the quality of life of slum dwellers by bringing communities together to form groups and to do policy, to do advocacy, and to do even dialogues and community planning. And one of the greatest examples we have so far as Muungano and SDI is the Mukuru SPA that began a while back around 2016 before the declaration. And so far, the NMS is implementing a lot of work in Mukuru, courtesy of what Muungano did. So I think in Nairobi, we had given a bit of context. The other team has tried to do that, so I'll not dwell so much on this. At Nairobi City, Nairobi Metropolitan now has grown. The regions within the Metropolitan are Nairobi County, Kiambu, Machakos, Kajiado, and Murang'a. That constitutes the Metropolitan region. And then we now have the city which is 696 kilometers square. And the city has about 5 million people by day and 4 million people by night. We have very high urbanization rates. And with this in mind, the kilometers squared of the city, we did profiling as SDI. We do what we call the informal settlement profiling. And as much as we have census data in 2019 saying that the informal settlements are around 50, the SDI data shows that we have around 150 in Nairobi alone. And these informal settlements host about 6% of the population, and they only keep around 6% of the development.
Sorry, Charity, kindly increase your audio. We are losing you, Charity.
What about now? Is that
Hello,
better?
Charity? Yes, kindly
Yes.
proceed. Thanks.
Okay, that's better. Hello,
Yes,
can you
please.
hear now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, great. Okay, so as I was mentioning is that, well, based on the Muungano data is that we have around 153 informal settlements, and these informal settlements host a majority of the urban population because it hosts around 60%, and they only cover about 6% of the developable land and only 1% of residential land. So why do we say we have 153 informal settlements in Nairobi? Based on Muungano parameters, an informal settlement is an area that has insecurity of tenure and very poor housing and lack of basic, or rather poor basic services such as water, electricity, sanitation services. So that's what qualifies as informal settlements. So I think due to time, I'll just continue that. Well, this presentation is around climate change. And so we're just trying to showcase that majority of informal settlements are on ecologically fragile land. And so what that means is that there is poor housing development because of this fragility and because of insecurity of tenure. And then what happens is that there's a lot of evictions as government is trying to reclaim the fragile land and also the land. So we will have a lot of evictions. We have reduced dignity among residents because of living in such poor quality areas. We have even loss of property. An example is what just happened to Kwajenga in December. It was quite unfortunate. And then we have poor community consultations and engagement because there's that fear of interacting with the state because of fear of being evicted every now and then. So this again results in very high marginalization among the urban poor. It also results in mushrooming of informal settlements in other fragile areas because that is where the rent is affordable. That is where there is a bit of free land where informal settlements can come up. And so you'll notice that it is a pattern. Most of informal settlements, especially in Nairobi, are along the rivers. Ngong River, we have Nairobi River, we have Gitadhuru River. We have quite a number of rivers where these informal settlements are aligned. So we have the issue of climate change and the urban poor. So what are we saying when we say climate change and the urban poor? Is there recognition of climate change? So climate change has been a very elite discussion. It's just trickling down to the grassroots now. And so the community do not have much knowledge about climate change. And then we have the issue of urban poor being very minimal pollutants because most of the pollution from the urban poor is mainly on solid waste, but you'll find industrial waste, vehicular waste is produced by maybe the well-up and the middle class, but the most affected are the poor because this waste is mostly channeled towards the the urban poor areas. And then we also have a case of Mukuru where air and soil quality were very poor because of the neighboring industries. And Mukuru soil was even rendered so poor to even support urban agriculture. It can't do that at the moment. We have a lot of respiratory illnesses in Mukuru again being reported because of poor air quality. So we look at climate agenda. So again, for climate agenda, when it comes to the country, it's so much rural based, where we are looking at what are the challenges in rural areas, and the solution somehow always becomes planting trees, increasing number of trees. But we have this reality in urban settlements, and the most affected, as I've mentioned, are the urban poor, such as we have the heat island effect, we have poor solid waste management, among other challenges that are facing the urban poor communities. So I'll just continue. So we have, I just want to show a case of Mathare, of what's happening. So we have Mathare and Nairobi rivers. These are just rivers in blue. We're trying to show, and this is an informal settlement called Mathare Valley Settlement. This land again is on very ecologically fragile land because the area was a quarry, and then landfills were done and informal settlements came up or mushroomed in the area. And so we have a lot of extensive pollution of the river from the local community and also from the neighboring industries. So as SDI, we are doing a project called VCA. It basically means Voices for Just Climate Action, and it is centered in informal settlements, all the informal settlements in Nairobi, Nakuru, and Kisumu. So we can see the red polygons there. These are just a sample of informal settlements in Nairobi, and we have the rivers in blue. So that just goes to show what I was mentioning, that most of the informal settlements are along the rivers, and there's a lot of pollution and encroachment within these spaces that we need to preserve. These are just images showing the dire situation in the rivers. We are hurting our rivers because all the waste is channeled there. We have liquid waste. We have even a kid just dumping waste in the river because that is a norm. They don't have proper designated waste spaces, and so that now becomes the option of disposal. We also have raw sewer being disposed in the rivers. So these are the realities in informal settlements. So this again is an image of Mukuru. It's just showing how the river was in 2002. This here, if you can see my cursor, is Ngong River in 2002, very wide, even the settlement is not as populated. Then see the pattern in 2007, it's decreasing. Then we have 2008, more decrease. Then we have 2016, you can almost not see the river. It's very tiny. We have constructed everywhere. So, so what are we looking at here? What are some of the challenges the communities are going through because of being situated in fragile areas? So we have the challenges are very poor planning through urban marginalization. And so the solid waste in the area is disposed on the rivers. The liquid waste is also disposed there. And the existing waste collection groups, we have a lot of waste collection groups we profiled during this VCA activity. We profiled around 600 groups in informal settlements that are doing a lot of activities. However, they don't have places to dispose the waste. So their efforts are being frustrated because they cannot do waste management. They're just doing waste collection and dumping in another area, just shifting the problem from one area to another. We have a lot of illegal alcohol brewing also in the rivers. And these rivers, it's not only challenges, we also have a lot of youth that are doing wonderful activities along the rivers, as I'll show. So, so we also have a lot of community efforts within the Nairobi, Ngong, and Mathare River, such as waste collection. There's a lot of urban agriculture activities. We have a lot of conversion of waste spaces into productive public spaces, which is wonderful. And then we have a lot of ecosystem greening along these rivers. However, as I've mentioned, the community efforts are frustrated by lack of proper planning, coupled by lack of resources to scale up these efforts. So because, for instance, if a person is cleaning the river here, this is group one cleaning the river here, another group cleaning the river here, in between, there is nothing happening. People are continuing to dump waste. So it becomes a vicious cycle. The group will continue doing the same thing over and over again without any sustainability. So you'll see point one here is a group called ComGreen. And then we have point two here is a group called KEG.
they've done a lot of wonderful work along the river. So for instance, you'll see they've converted a dumping site into productive public spaces, which is very beautiful. Once you go to Korogocho, you'll find the space and people just want to relax there because of the ambience. Then we have group 2, which is the keg. It has also converted a waste space into very nice play spaces for kids and also relaxing spaces for adults. Right now, even campaigns are happening on these grounds because of how wonderful the spaces have been converted. So why are we talking about adaptation planning? Because I think the whole of this presentation is driving towards adaptation planning. It's because adaptation planning does not revolve around climate only, but it is holistic. It will also address other challenges in the process, such as infrastructure. It will ensure that there is climate-proof infrastructure, and then there will be improved sanitation. Because for you to stop polluting, say, the river, you need a sewer system to stop disposing the raw sewer into the river. Then there will be recreational spaces. An example is what I've shown you in those previous slides. Beautiful spaces for interaction with the community, which will improve the social cohesion. Then we will have improved livelihoods because these spaces can also be used for income generating activities. We'll have increased safety and security, proper housing, clean and healthy environments. So what is the ask in this case? In this case, the ask is that the county government of Nairobi has a climate change action plan, and it is yet to be launched. So that is why we are saying maybe we need to treat climate change as a matter of urgency. So the thing we need to know is when the plan is being launched, when it will start being enforced. So what we are lacking within the city is a county climate change policy, and we don't also have a climate change finance act. So what this means is that all the efforts of the local communities are frustrated because they don't have the resources to upscale some of these activities and also align their local efforts to the adaptation plans at the city.
Hello, Charity.
So by us having a climate for the climate actors sustain their efforts, or yes, okay, yeah, we'll be able to support them through that framework, and then now their efforts can be linked to the overall climate plans, so that there is no disconnect between the overall county and the informal settlements. We don't want a situation of increased marginalization when it comes to climate change. We want that involvement, and the only way one of the ways we can achieve it is by having that climate change finance act, climate change, so that the local communities can be sustained. So I think my last slide is that what we need to do now is to scale up ongoing climate actions through climate change financing, as I've mentioned, and then also mainstream local efforts into larger integrated adaptation plans, because there are a lot of efforts as we've seen. That is just a very short example. We have a lot of examples. Due to time, I won't show all of them. And then we also need to know when is this climate change action plan being done. And then we also need to formulate a County Climate Change Finance Act. This will act as a framework to disseminate finances up to the ward level, which can trickle down to the local communities and sustain their efforts. Yeah, so I think that marks the end of my presentation, and over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Charity, for sharing that with us. I believe that we are learning and interacting even in the chat box. I'll now invite the Federal University of Technology Nigeria, dealing with the flood assessment project in Lokoja and Ibadan and Lagos metropolises to make their presentation. Are you on call, please? Lokoja Ibadan project, are you on call? All right, so is the CASA initiative Ghana ready?
Yeah, you're ready.
All right, kindly proceed. Kindly take 8 minutes. If you see my video just pop up during your presentation, just wind up Thank you so much for the lesson so far. Very rich discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague, Jonathan Guka. Jonathan represents CASA Ghana Initiative, and I represent the Center for Earth Observation and Environmental Research. Our project focus on enhancing adaptive strategies to cope with climate-induced coastal erosion in Ghana. So we're just going to give you a context and the objectives of the project, talk a little bit about the implemented activities, and then the key messages and lessons that were learned. Are you still able to see my slides? Are they rolling?
Yes, they are. Kindly proceed.
So the context is that coastal erosion and flooding has actually been with us since Adam, but climate change and sea level rise is actually exacerbating, increasing the incidence of these events along the coast of Ghana. Recently, in November 2021, we had a very serious issue of tidal waves, which actually rendered about 3 people homeless. And there are actually projections that this is going to worsen as we go along, because compared to the year 2000, the sea level rise is projected to go up to about 1.1 meters by 2100. And that actually brings to the fore the need for enhanced capacity to develop adaptive strategies to mitigate and also adapt to coastal erosion and flooding in the coast of Ghana. As I've already mentioned, ESCOSEC, that is the project that we implemented, actually looked to consult stakeholders. Because the coastal erosion problem is now a national problem. It's been discussed at Parliament, but there is not much focus on actually what is happening along the coast and the kind of adaptation strategies that can reduce it. And in terms of the focus, identifying the priority areas for immediate intervention and to co-create solutions with the people who are on the ground, people who are actually facing this flooding and erosion has been limited. And so our objective in this project was to do consultations and to co-identify priority areas for intervention, and also to come out with potential solutions which we could take on after this project, either with ARA or with other funders, so that we can work together with the communities that are affected. So we focus on 3 main discussions. The first one looked at the effectiveness of existing adaptation strategies, because there are some adaptation strategies that are going on, and we wanted to connect with the community to know how effective these strategies are and how we can improve or enhance them. The second one looked at data availability, because you cannot develop adaptation plans and you cannot implement them, you cannot monitor them without data. And so we had to connect also with stakeholders, both community and national level, to find out where we are at in terms of data availability for adaptation planning, for implementation, and also for monitoring. And the third one was to look at capacity. If we see that there are some defects with the adaptation strategies, and we see that there is limited data, do we have the capacity to actually resolve these challenges? If we do not have the capacity, what can we do to enhance that capacity? So these were the 3 consultative meetings that we held with stakeholders at different levels of decision making. And I tell you a bit about that very soon. So the implemented activities, as I said, we actually, if you can see my cursor, we actually implemented these along the coast at 3 different areas, consulting 3 different levels of stakeholders, or at least the main focus were 3 different stakeholders. The first one that focused on the effectiveness of the strategies were done at the Angloga Keta area. This is in terms of vulnerability to coastal erosion and flooding, the hotspot in Ghana. And this is where the event of November 2021 actually happened. And here our focus was actually connecting with community members, those who are on the ground, those who are bearing the brunt of the coastal erosion and flooding issue. And so we were able to hold stakeholder consultations with them and to discuss with them the effectiveness of strategies and how we can improve them. The second one took place in Accra, which is the national capital, because we're talking about data. And most of the time, data provision is either by government institutions or by private, institutions, policymakers, and so government departments, specialized departments. And so we had this meeting in Accra to try to connect with policymakers and data providers as to the status of our data systems, especially for planning and implementing and monitoring adaptation strategies. And the third one took place in Cape Coast, which is a bit to the west. And this focused on both community members and policymakers, because we need capacity both at both levels, at community level, but also at national level in terms of data provision. So these are, in summary, the implemented activities that were done. We had a wide range of stakeholders. And at each consultative meeting, we had all these stakeholders there, but each one of them focused on one or two of these. So we had government ministries. We have the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, the Gender Ministry. We have specialized government agencies and departments and authorities. So there's the Coastal Development Authority in Ghana, they were in. And we had traditional leaders. We had fishermen and fishmongers, because they are also very strong coastal actors and stakeholders. We had the civil society organizations. We had research and academia. The third consultative meeting was held at the University of Cape Coast. And we have professors attending, those who have been doing work in this area. We had community members. We had local authorities, that is the district assemblies, municipal assemblies, and then we have the private sector. So all these stakeholders were consulted in terms of discussing the current situation with coastal erosion management in Ghana. So just some few slides on what came up out of our discussions and the potential areas that we need to focus on in terms of immediate interventions to mitigate and also adapt to coastal erosion and flooding. So the first one that came out in terms of the effectiveness of adaptation is that hard engineering solutions, which interestingly, the government of Ghana is focusing on, temporarily actually provide some solution. It leads to the accretion of sediments on one hand or on one part of these defense walls, but actually causes more erosion on the other part of the defense walls. And this is very interesting, because when the event in November happened, Parliament was actually discussing constructing another sea defense wall, and the Ministry of Finance was actually being pushed to put that into the 2022 budget. And here we had local communities actually saying that yes, it actually solves part of the problems, but it doesn't actually holistically solve the problem. And in the long run, it seems to cause more problem than even what it does in the short run. And a lot of discussion went on about nature-based solutions, with community members admitting and acknowledging that actually nature-based solutions could be a viable replacement or even complement in terms of having hybrid systems along our coast. So it means that we can have the defense walls or the revetments or the grounds, but also to have some either plantations around it, so that it actually consolidates the efforts and does not lead to more erosion on other parts of the sea defense walls or the hard engineering. There was also discussions on beach nourishment, that is bringing more sediments onto the beach, especially when there is a high incidence of erosion. But the challenge here was getting beach compatible sand. And there were a lot of discussions, because in other jurisdictions where they are actually dredging from inside the sea could also have an impact, especially in terms of the intensity that the waves actually bring. So beach nourishment was actually identified as a very potent soft solution, but in terms of getting the resources for it, it was tricky. But what came out very, very strongly was mangroves or other plantations, mangroves, acacia, coconut, and coastal shrubs. And civil society organizations actually admitted that they have planted coconuts and mangroves that have actually yielded results. And so there were a lot of push for this. But whilst the committee members admitted that soft solutions were very...
Sorry, Gerald.
Yes.
To disrupt. Just giving you a heads up. Kindly, you have 2 minutes, please. Kindly.
I have 2 minutes. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah. So there were actually challenges because of livelihood issues. The committee members know that yes, plantations are very, very useful for reducing the impact, but a lot of them need mangroves, for example, for firewood. There's a lot of sand winning along the coast. There's also salt mining. All these lead to the destruction of vegetative cover. So it is important for us, or the message that came out is that it's important for us to investigate and promote alternative livelihoods, which is necessary to balance the need for livelihoods, but also the need for conservation. And this was a very strong message that came. We need to live, but we also need to conserve. The second one on data, I'll just summarize that we found significant gaps in the data required for planning and implementation and monitoring. And one very key data, for example, is shoreline dynamics, because you need to understand how the shoreline is behaving to be able to plan adaptation strategies. There's also poor information on vegetative cover dynamics and groundwater monitoring, because there are also people who are using groundwater for irrigation along the coast. And that is leading to, saltwater intrusion along the coast. So the key message over here was for a dedicated coastal management policy to coordinate data collection for adaptation planning, as well as implementation and monitoring. And there's also poor coordination or collaboration between actors who are providing data, both government to government and also government to private sector. The third one, which looked at capacity, actually stressed on the need for more education, that people need to be sensitized on the climate change impacts, sea level rise in nature-based solutions, and also sustainable resource use. We learned from the community that they are pushing more for community-led governance mechanism, which allows the community members to lead actually in the management of resources. I think there's some mistrust with the current structures that are actually managing, especially with the police service, with the traditional authorities and the others. The third one is capacity to also identify and pursue alternative livelihoods. It is important to identify entrepreneurship options, green businesses along the coast, where people can actually earn a living, but also be able to plow back into nature, for example, in planting mangroves and other things, but also using that resources for businesses that is identify alternative livelihoods instead of destroying the vegetation. And then the last one, it's about early warning system. There are a lot of indigenous knowledge that people need capacity to be able to bring it, either document it or bring it to the formal sector so that this can be pushed forward. So my final slide on the conclusion. Yeah, I'm done. Just give me 30 seconds. So the stakeholder consultations were hugely successful and very overly patronized. A lot of instances, the number of people that we expected, we got more than that. There are similarities between challenges on the coast, but there are also peculiarities. So one solution here might not work in another area. So we need actually locally adapted solutions. Education and sensitization cuts across in almost all the three areas. They were mentioned about more education on the impacts and also in identifying alternative livelihoods. Coastal management policy, there's no dedicated coastal management policy. And here, community members need to be capacitated to make strong inputs into the development of a coastal management policy. And maybe the last one that I would say is that nature-based solutions are very, very strong. The community members know that it works. We only have to make sure that they are provided alternative livelihoods so that they don't go destroying it. And they can also get the economic benefit as well as environmental and social benefits all from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Kasagan Initiative. At this moment, I'll just invite Meet Naturally South Africa to make their presentation, please, if you're on call. Thanks, Gerald. Meet Naturally, please, if you're on call. I believe
Thank you. I'm sharing my screen now.
Okay, thanks.
Alrighty.
Kindly take 7 minutes, please.
Sure, we will be as quick as we can. Thank you so much for all these very, very interesting presentations. So to jump right into it, thank you everyone. My name is Ruan de Wet. James Kinghorn will also be presenting some of these slides. So if he could also be added as a panelist so that he can unmute himself, that would be great. I'm from Meet Naturally Africa, and we're actually working with some of these communities. I won't go into too much detail though. James is working with us as well as an environmental economist to try and understand the impacts of the different programs that we're working on, specifically on community well-being. The focus
are you sharing your slides with us? Sorry, are you sharing your slides with us?
I thought I was, but obviously I'm not. Let me try that again. Yes, that one, share. Okay.
Thanks.
It should hopefully come through now. Great. So the challenge that we were trying to understand that these communities are facing, the burning issue that we were trying to understand through these workshops, was the issue of reinforcing systemic socio-ecological vulnerabilities, particularly of pastoralist communities, so farming communities within the former homelands of South Africa. So that is the challenge, and it seems to be a very similar challenge to what other people are presenting on. So as a brief overview of some of our objectives, we were really wanting to understand community perception of climate change vulnerabilities and what their priorities are. Critically, this is a co-creation process. So we're not wanting to impose our own perspectives to make sure that we're understanding the nuances that the community perceives around these issues, so that when we're designing activities, we can make sure that they're well adapted or well designed for those. And again, that is the burning issue that I've described already. For a bit of context, we're in South Africa, just south of the Lesotho border in the Drakensberg sub-escarpment. And we had these workshops over 2 days with 40 to 50 participants. It varied between the days. So it was a wonderful turnout in this community. And then followed by another day of focus group discussions where we could go much deeper. So those 2 days of workshops were very long, very intense workshop days. And then we got to go a little bit deeper. And we had about 11 facilitators from Meet Naturally, from our local partners who are embedded within that catchment, and also from some of the other specialists such as James, who's supporting us. So very simply on the process that we were following, so we started off contextualizing some of the climate change concepts. These are concepts that are not unfamiliar to these communities, but the particular language, the vocabulary, the way that we talk about it, and thinking about it under the understanding of climate change rather than just it being a drought was quite important. So providing some of that context so that we were grounded in what we were going to be discussing. And then the whole process was about breaking out into small groups and having these reflections so that it wasn't a presentation at the front, but rather much more of a participatory process. So reflecting on some of the impacts that they're experiencing, then providing feedback from each small group discussion to the whole group so that we can be sharing some ideas. Then we went through several exercises to narrow down and really understand those impacts and particularly what the priorities were through this voting system, sex disaggregated, gender disaggregated voting systems. And then that gave us the opportunity to debate some of the details of those a little bit more, understand them in some more context. We then had on the second day a reflection session back to everything that was discussed on the first day to make sure that it was captured and understood appropriately. And then the second day focused now not just on the impacts, but what are the adaptive strategies that are already in place. And we spent a whole day unpacking those, and James will share some of the outcomes from that. Then we had a bit of a question and answer, and you know, this is all happening within the context of several programs that are happening within the catchments, and also we wanted to make sure that the communities didn't feel that we were just there to get a whole bunch of information from them and then move on. So we had some discussion about what is the way forward with those discussions. And then lastly, we had consolidation and focus group discussions that we were able to then dive deeper into. So very much not us trying to impose any solutions. It was really just understanding the problem and making sure that we're hearing the community. James, are you able to present on the outcomes?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Ruan. Great. Okay, so from the participants, these are the key kind of themes that emerged. We found that wildfires, storms, heavy rains and floods, drought and wattle were all deemed as kind of climate-related threats happening in the area. Wattle in particular is an invasive species that's found in this part of the world. And these are the kind of impacts that we see associated. And you can see that they're kind of interlinked, all working together in these kind of negative cycles with damage to buildings. We've got loss of livestock, which is hugely important for a pastoralist community like this. We've got health impacts, access to education and healthcare is also impacted. And so these kind of impacts run through in multiple kind of dimensions. Yeah, we also saw that there was threats to human-wildlife conflict. Safety and security was also an issue, as well as food and water security, and conflict over resources, also a key issue that was raised. And then we looked at some of the kind of underlying issues that are kind of exacerbating. These are existing socioeconomic issues in many cases. We're dealing with an area with a long history of marginalization. And so what we see is that institutions are not capable of enforcing local rules and norms. There's lack of unity, no initiative or capacity, lack of government support. And then, yeah, we've got a greater reliance on social grants, feedback between the impacts, increases in crime and domestic violence. And then women, especially youth, adapting to these challenges with transactional sex, which leads them to exposure to sexually transmitted diseases and teenage pregnancy. And then to present a bit more about the outcomes on the next slide. These are just some of the key quotes that came. Somebody shared that she was unable to sleep last night because she kept thinking about climate change, why we aren't getting any information about it, how it's impacting us, and what we need to do about it. Somebody else mentioned that we all know that about droughts, floods, storms, fires, wattle invasions, and how these impact us. But we've never had a chance to sit down and talk properly about what we can work together to do to adapt. And then someone else mentioned, we don't need to wait for outsiders to fix our problems for us. We are the ones who understand our problems and can do something about it, which comes back to the power of this co-creation process, I think, which is really just putting the ball in the community's hands. And then lastly, these are just a few of the kind of underlying themes that emerged. The first one was that youth came up as a quite a significant issue, as a key group which is currently marginalized and disengaged, but highlighted as key to building a resilient future through climate action. Gender was also big. Hlankomo community is grappling with the tension between the marginalization of women under traditional political and economic structures and the need to center women as agents of positive change. And then institutions, we've got a dual system of governance, and it's hindering enforcement of local rules and norms, especially around sustainable land management. So there was a suggestion that institutions could potentially be empowered by building their legitimacy through greater participation of women and youth. These are just emerging themes, and we're looking to explore these further as we move forward. Yeah, and then I think just a few key reflections on the process. The co-creation was a process that encouraged much greater participation and ownership. There was very little we had to explain. People are very familiar with climate change impacts. And we will be using a similar process in the future engagement that we'll be having with communities, especially when we're conducting research into well-being and other dimensions of climate change priorities. Yeah, thanks very much for your time, everybody. Looking forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much, Mitch, naturally, for your presentation, and thanks for keeping time as well. That's appreciated. I'd like to invite Jackson Washira, if you're able to make your presentation now. Jackson?
Yeah, thanks so much, Leah. In a minute, share screen.
All right. I'll allocate you 5 minutes, please.
Okay, please confirm that you can see my
Yes,
screen.
we can see your screen. Just put it on slideshow. Yeah, yeah.
Is it on slideshow now? From the beginning, okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Leah, and ARIN and Ara for the invitation to make this short presentation. It's going to be a really short one, and I hope that I can keep to the 5 minutes allocated. My name is Jackson Washira, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the Institute for Climate Change Adaptation at the University of Nairobi. And I'm part of a really big team that is undertaking a research project on rights and resilience in Kenya's pastoral regions of Kajiado and Samburu. And the project is called Rights and Resilience, with funding from Danida. And it's having a couple of research partners led by the University of Nairobi, the University of Copenhagen, University of Roskilde, the International Livestock Research Institute, and the Danish Institute for International Studies. And the main aim of the research is to investigate the relationships between resilience and land rights in the context of pastoralist climate change adaptation in Kenya. Given that there's already quite a lot of research that is happening around resilience as a concept and land rights as a concept, but the interrelationship between these two very important and contemporary, yet long-standing concepts has really been minimal. So through diverse particular areas of focus, such as land needs and land conflicts and land law reforms, we are seeking to understand how this really interrelate with the pastoralist climate change adaptation. And for my PhD, I'm particularly interested in understanding climate change adaptation amongst pastoralists in the context of community-based conservation. And I will not go back, I will not go into the details of the two concepts, but I'll just say that community-based conservation has really grown in Kenya. And of course, we know it's not a new concept in Africa, starting the 1990s. But in the last decade or so, the concept has really grown, particularly in northern Kenya, with it being actually projected as a vehicle for resilient communities. As you can see on this photo, which I have extracted from one of the promoters of community-based conservations in Kenya, there are numerous community-based conservations that have come up, about 39 of them, within an extremely huge landmass of about 42,000 square kilometers. This is almost 5 million hectares of land, and brings together quite numerous ethnic groups. But the other side, studies do indicate that this concept is associated with some form of conflict. And our research also indicates some form of multi-layered intra-ethnic conflicts over the use of natural resources and benefits, as well as boundaries. And of course, some literature also critiques it as a form of large-scale acquisition or land grabbing. And therefore, it's important to see how a pastoralist climate change adaptation plays out in the context of this kind of an imperative, particularly so given that climate change adaptation should also be understood as a political process, for which case community-based conservation is also a really political process. So I'm going to share. I'm doing my work in Samburu County of Kenya, which is one of the 23 arid and semi-arid counties. You can see it is tucked into some place north of Nairobi, and it's characterized with quite some rudimentary infrastructure and access to basic services. And so far, the work has involved, unstructured interviews or semi-structured interviews with about 30 key informants, about focus group discussions with various communities, and also about 270 structured interviews with household heads and spouses. And it's an ongoing work. And I'm just going to share some very few emerging findings that is, of course, a work in progress and therefore should not be cited. We wanted to know, or I wanted to know, what are the main impacts of climate change in this region, because already communities unequivocally mentioned that there has been a lot of climatic changes in this region. And what seems to be the most prevalent adaptation strategy remains, or rather impact, is the reduced pasture for livestock. And this has also been associated with the increased livestock deaths and reduced food for human consumption. And if you were to take the three topmost impacts of climate change on pastoralists, we can see a huge interrelationship, because livestock remains the key source of livelihood for a majority of these residents. So we also wanted to know how they are actually adapting or responding to these changes. And I would focus on the three main approaches. And the first one is further migration in search of water and pasture. And as you know, migration has sort of been the sine qua non for successful pastoral production across the world. But we're finding that they are now migrating further and further. And on top of that, we're having people moving away from pastoralism and taking casual employment. And on top of that, what is really interesting in the context of my work is that pastoralists are also opting to graze in areas that have been conserved for wildlife purposes. And this gives us some important takeaways, given on this really short snapshot of how pastoralists are adapting and how they have been impacted by adverse impacts of climate change. And the first one is that in the context of community-based conservation, pastoralist adaptation is mainly happening in the form of nomadic pastoralism. So, of course, conservation imperatives present different production requirements for pastoralists, but we're finding that despite this, the main adaptation strategies are happening in the context of nomadic pastoralism, and that means migrating further and further away. And of course, we see that some adaptation is also happening outside pastoralism. In the form of casual employment and grazing in conservation areas, and despite the fact that there is adaptation happening, there appears to also be a form of maladaptation happening. For instance, in the form of over-reliance on aid and grazing in conservation areas. And why is this a form of maladaptation? For instance, it is because it is a huge source of conflict as pastoralists compete over really limited pasture and resources that have been set aside for purposes of conservation. And of course, we can also see that they are reducing meals per day, which could predispose them to health-related, malnutrition-related challenges. So those are some of the few takeaways, and of course, there's a lot more that can come out with more consideration of data. And I beg to stop at that time. I hope I've kept to the 5 minutes layer, and thank you so much.
You've done excellently well. Thank you so much, Jackson, for your presentation. I'll invite the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, if they're on call, please. Nomaka. Nomaka or your colleague, are you on call? Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, please. Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, Green Resources Limited, Rwanda. No, we cannot hear you, Nomaka. I'll just skip to one more presentation as you try to get a foot in there. Green Resources Rwanda.
I guess Nomaka Lea is saying he has to go on boarding. So if maybe he muted or unmuted.
All right. Let's just go to one more presentation. You can get in touch with me, Nwamaka, so that we see how to coordinate your presentation. Green Resources Rwanda. Desir, are you ready with your presentation?
Excuse me, ma'am. Nomaka has got access to panelist, so please try it.
Hello.
Oh yes, Nomaka, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just going to try out something.
Okay, just 5 minutes max, Nomaka.
Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks. Good morning. We were just wondering how I can share the slides because I'm at the airport. So our project is on fisheries. My name is Nwamaka Okeke Obuafo. I'm a research fellow at the University of Leeds, and we are working together with the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone. So our research is on climate smart fisheries. Just to say that fish is very important in rural African communities, at least for food, jobs, and nutrition security. It's important to state that over 200 million Africans depend on fish as a source of income, as a source of primary income and secondary income. But there is a problem. The problem is that climate change is impacting very negatively on the fish stocks. The rising sea temperature caused fish to migrate away from the tropics to colder waters. What that then means for a fisherman with his very little motorized canoe is that he needs to travel very far, burn so much fuel, which is very riskier. So sometimes most of these fishers drown. And what it then means for the fisher's family is that the children and the wife becomes a widow, and then this impacts on the livelihoods of families. And we've seen that in Ghana, we've seen that in Senegal, even in Kenya and Nigeria, Sierra Leone, where we've been working. And then for people that survive it, they spend so much money buying fuel. So the operational cost of fishing increases, and sometimes people with very less poor engines cannot go to fish because they won't have catch. And so when fishers don't go out to fish, the little profit or their fishing capital, they continue to feed their family on that, and before you know it, the family gets to zero. That is hunger, that is poverty, and that's why you see most rural fishing communities in West Africa are very poor. And then the impact of climate change also spreads to the secondary sectors, because when the fisherman does not have fish to sell, women don't have fish to buy. And even when there's fish to sell, maybe there will be heavy rains or there will be storm, women just have this fish and the fish is highly perishable, it gets spoiled. And so how do communities respond to the impact of climate change? They tend to overfish. What these people do is, what fishers and their families do is they go to the mangrove where fish lay their eggs, and they begin to catch little fish. And so in most West African countries, there's what we call the small pelagic fish. These are things like tuna, the sardines, the common fish in our market. It is 90% overfished and used up by rural dwellers, and that's a very big problem. So by the time they overfish, or on top of that, the impact of climate change, you know, it's like just an autoimmune disease. You try to survive, but your system continues to destroy that white blood cell that you have. And the second thing is, again, the women try to destroy or cut off mangrove to dry their fish or to sell as firewood. I did say that mangroves are where these fish themselves breed. And then what we've seen in most West African communities is that they have accepted poverty and hardship because there's nothing else for them to do. And then we looked at, with our partners, we looked at current efforts. What has government put in place? These efforts are long-term for strategy efforts. The first is marine protected areas. I mean, I, for one, would also not follow these marine protected areas because the government will tell you, don't catch fish here. It's a breeding ground for fish. But fishermen will tell you, there is no fish. If you say, I should not catch fish, how then do I feed my children? So in West Africa, marine protected areas are not the answer to the problem of climate change. Then there is this issue of co-management. Communities should manage their fisheries alongside with other stakeholders like the industrial fishers. But what we have seen, especially interacting with our partners in Sierra Leone and Liberia, it's that the people that have much power take decisions to their favor. And often case, it is the industrial fishers that come from the European Union and other parts of Asia, including China and Korea. So co-management, which is one of the efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change, also failed abysmally as much as the marine protected areas. Then the government created the wealth creation strategy. It means that the industrial fishers should fish as much as they can, pay money to the government so that there will be this trickle-down effect, and the government will use the money to support communities. But again, there's this issue of corruption. When industrial fishers fish, the monies get to the government. Even before it gets to the government from the ministry, it's corruption. It does not trickle down. And if we know the economics of the trickle-down effect, communities say they have not seen development. And there is what they call the social welfare, which is another way the government tried to mitigate the impact of climate change. In this case, it says allow artisanal fishers, these are poor fishermen, to fish as much as they can so that they can feed their family as the impact of climate change continues to impact on these families. But the issue is that there is no fish. It's already used up by 90%, and the fishers themselves are poor. So when they go out, they either drown or they don't even get fish. And so what we have proposed, the missing link is that what the government has proposed, the co-management, the wealth creation, all of these lack one essential ingredient. It lacks the the impact of climate change. There is no climate smart fisheries. And so what we have proposed with our partners from the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the University of Leeds is a climate smart fisheries strategy. And how does it work? With our partners, we have said, okay, so we look at weather information. Are communities using weather information to plan their fishing? If they use weather information and know that it will be windy or it will rain on a set date, they will not burn their fuel. If they have access to weather, tailored weather information to meet their needs, they will be able to plan alternative livelihoods. And then we also integrate weather information aquaculture, which is the artificial growing of fish, and then marine fisheries. So we have proposed to integrate the benefits of using weather information, growing fish or throwing fish into lake or even the water, so that this fish will multiply for the fishers. But then there is also the issue that climate change affects aquaculture. So what we are doing at the stage that we are experimenting fish species that we can grow that can be resilient to the impact of climate change. And that is where we are at the moment. We are also liaising with meteorological agencies in Liberia, our case countries, and Sierra Leone, to look at whether we are able to produce weather products that will suit fishermen. So that's what we are trying to look at, how to integrate this called three things: weather information, the growing of fish. And then there is an element of nature-based solution, biodiversity conservation, so that communities will be less reliant on marine capture fisheries, that's the natural fish that comes from the water, and more reliant on the ones that will grow. If that is the case, they would stop destroying the mangroves and the seagrass. The seagrass is one of those things the government have put in place to absorb CO2, but communities destroy that in their quest to look for fish. Our strategy is co-creation, and our own method is a direct method that fishers can survive using weather information, and that fishers can survive by growing fish. And who are our partners? Fishermen and women from Liberia, coastal communities, fishing communities, and in Sierra Leone, we have also included more women and the elderly people. Of course, these people are the worst hit by the impact of climate change. We have fishmongers, we have researchers and policymakers from Liberia, Sierra Leone, University of Leeds, representatives from Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the UK's meteorological agencies. And we also have representatives from interested public and private sector. So far, we are at the process working with the affected communities to see how we can integrate weather information, aquaculture, and climate change. It has not been easy over the past 3 months. For the past 1 month, like I did say yesterday, it's like working with different people. We needed to tolerate each other, understand each other, conquer our ideological differences and suspicions. And then by that, we're able to bridge our social gap. At this moment, we are finding a common ground, trying to use local-based solutions. What we are trying to do is to integrate these three components in a way that it will work for the people. It's not in a way that we are transferring knowledge from the global north to the south. No, we are working with communities. We go to the communities, we'll do meetings with the communities to find out how these components can be integrated to suit them. And I want to say a very big thank you to you, Lee, and the organizers of the conference, the Adaptation Research Alliance, and the British Aid for funding this project. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nwamaka, for pulling through. It's such an excellent presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll like to invite Green Limited Resources Rwanda. I believe you're now ready. We have only one more presentation to go. I anticipate that will be done by 12:45 East African time. Thanks. Rwanda, kindly take 4 minutes. Thank you, Nwamaka.
Thank you so much. Can you see this?
Yes, we can see your screen. Kindly put it on slideshow.
Sorry. Thank you so much. My name is Sengoga Desire. I'm from Rwanda.
Thanks.
under the Green Resources Company, we are one of the grantees of the Adaptation Research Alliance work being done across the globe. Ours is building the resilience of communities with increased local adaptive capacity to climate change in Nyabihu District, Rwanda. The burning issue in the area is more of a there is large coupled with intense rainfall, and this really has affected the farming communities with a lot of soil erosion and also other climate related disasters such as floods, as you can see on the map, destroying the infrastructures and the lives of people, their homes, and really affecting their livelihoods. What we have done so far under the grant, we have done several trainings. One, we did a training with the young professionals on climate change adaptation, on how do you design a project for climate change adaptation. I've also done a training with farmers and also extension agents on the best practices on how to set up tree nurseries, how to maintain them, and how do you take the products from the tree nurseries, the activities, just to protect our lands from soil erosion. And this really has been very informative and productive. And we have also gone on site communities to plant trees across some lands we would say were very naked. These are the pictures from the young professionals. We did very with them. As you can see, Rwanda has committed to mobilize 11 billion USDs for their NDCs and 5.3 billion they are on adaptation. You can see on the map, on the image, more than half is on agriculture. So there's a lot of work to be done into the agriculture sector on adaptation. We have, as I said, these are leaders of 6 cooperatives that we worked with for 2 days during the training. We had really very informative discussions. Achievements for the grant, we have so far planted 400 agroforestry trees, alnus, 500 avocados. This is for nutrition and also livelihoods. We have covered 4 hectares with for soil erosion reduction. We have trained 20 professionals, 22 farmers. We have engaged 6 cooperatives. We have we have worked with the 120 youth in the area, and we have connected with other local authorities. This is at the sector level where we train in the fields. We have had an opportunity to connect with various stakeholders like the Rwanda Water Resources Board, Nyabihu District and Mukabira sector, extension agents, youth groups in the area. We worked with 2 local NGOs in the environment and climate change. We worked 6 cooperatives, and also we trained 4 graduates under this project. But one of the main achievements is really working with the communities, helping them understand their role in climate adaptation. And there is a lot to be done, and we invite various partners, stakeholders to join us. As you can see in the image, there's a lot to be done. They have terraces, but really there's no protection. So we need more trees, we need more practices to be able to protect the lands and the fields. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Desir. Definitely a bit of internet mishap there, but we'll be able to share the slides and really look intricately into the various initiatives. At this juncture, I'd just like to close out our presentations. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming in and just presenting the engagement on the charts. Yeah, that has been very, very useful. I'll invite Dr. Atela to just give us a 5-minute reflection and to conclude as well. All at a go. Dr. Atela, are you on call, please?
I thought there are a couple of questions in the chat which should have been addressed, but I think because of time, it would be good to prepare, a response kind of outline to some of those questions. And also just to say, maybe take 1 minute to say that the presentations have been really rich. I think we learn a number of things. Number one, I see the situation across the countries and across the cases. The climatic impacts, especially for local communities, are becoming very diverse beyond the traditional impacts that were known. And so the cases from South Africa, Kenya, we see situations where impacts are becoming more cascading and they're becoming more complex. So this needs to be paid or given attention. The changing nature of climatic impacts in the local communities is a key thing. Number two is the fact that responding to this impact in terms of locally led adaptation requires a holistic approach. I think the Kenyan case have strengthened the need to see adaptation not as a standalone thing, but a sort of a holistic element that basically is contributed to also by other drivers in the society, and because adaptation itself coexists with other factors within the community. So this is a very important point that we need to look at it, but even also not just in terms of the actions, but also in terms of the socio-different, the adaptation for different groups, as the Sierra Leone case, as mentioned, as shown, is actually, we need to be able to understand the needs for the different groups, the kinds of adaptations that would actually move, but also in terms of ecologies, the coastal ecologies, the pastoralism, there's a lot of diversity when it comes to locally led adaptation based on some of those contextual differences. And number three, I think the other point that has come out strongly is the element of that, the approaches to try and engage or to address some of these impacts. I think there is a very strong theme that is running across the cases, the need for a stronger co-creation and new innovative ways of engaging communities. So we've seen this in the South African case, the Ghana case, of course the Rwanda case, but also the Kenyan case through the community labs. So they need to be more innovative beyond the traditional ways within which the communities were being engaged. A number of solutions and opportunities are emerging. I mean, the case of Ghana, nature-based solutions is a very interesting element. So these solutions need really to be grounded within the communities. However, one of the challenges that I think is coming out from the cases is the fact that the lack of structures. I see this cry across the cases, the structures to connect the communities to the broader opportunities. While there are a lot of things going on within the communities, we see in Kenya, for instance, there are no localized or local government policies, which then could be the link or the bridge between the local communities to the broader national and global opportunities. And I see this across the different countries. The case of Sierra Leone, basically the fisheries, the lack of climate smart strategies. This is also a key case that have come. So overall, I think there's a lot of good learnings that have come from the presentations, and I think these learnings basically will need to be well contextualized and be shared out broadly. So Leah, those are some of my reflections from the discussions, and I do believe that we will be able to continue with this learning and teasing out some of these points much more clearly.
Indeed, and we will be continuing even on 12th April during our regional Adaptation Research Alliance convention that we're having virtually. So special apologies to GWP Tanzania who are not able to make their presentation, but we really look forward to intricately dissecting these issues. Thank you so much for those who have answered the asked questions on chat, and thank you for your participation.